That's the on-point lap quilt?
Yes.
All right. And so tell us a little bit about the fact that we have these squares and, of course, then sashing, or in between.
Correct. And what makes this so wonderful is we have a perfect cornerstone that is developed when we're doing the technique, and we did not inset these.
All right. You're going to show us how.
I am.
What do we need to get started?
To get started, we need an on-point fusible grid.
Okay. And we
5-inch squares.
Fabric. So you cut your fabric into 5-inch squares, and this would be your border.
Correct.
And then your sashings.
Correct.
And how wide are your sashes?
1 3/4 inches.
And we will have these instructions on the website.
Yes, we will.
Okay. And some thread for your piecing.
Correct.
Okay. And it's going to be a little different kind of piecing that we're going to show.
Yes, it is.
So let's take a look at about how you get started. Now, look for a grid with the squares on point. Is that right?
Absolutely.
To do this technique.
Absolutely. And with the fusible grid, we have a rough side and a smooth side. You always need to make sure that you're using the rough side. It's got the bumps on it.
And when you say using, that's the side that's up that you're
Correct.
fusing to.
Correct.
Okay, so, and you want to be on an ironing surface.
Absolutely.
Now,
with a light colored background.
This is 44 inches wide, and you just buy the yardage you need, and then to put it together, you can line up the grids and fuse it.
Correct.
So
for the queen size quilts or some of the other projects.
All right. So how then do we get started knowing where to put the pieces and how wide to make them for our lap size? Does our lap size start with a little bigger piece? So
Right. It's 60 inches and 44 inches wide.
All right.
Because of the on-point design, it's a little crazy to work with it this way. So in all of our projects, we turn the grid so it's on point.
Okay,
And
so
now,
the corner of the grid edge is on point and your squares are going straight across.
Right.
It's easier to work that way.
Visually,
Okay.
makes it very...
Good tip. Good tip.
So we're going to lay down our 5-inch square within the 1-inch grid opening. Because of the perfect 1-inch designs, everything matches up.
Okay.
And
So
we're
this-
just going to follow the pattern
So you are starting your piecing right now.
We're going to lay it out, and as we go, we fuse it using an applique pressing sheet.
So what about those that are hanging off? I see you've got some hanging off there. Is that a problem?
No, because then when we go to trim the quilt, we're going to cut through these and have perfect triangles on the sides of the quilt.
And you're leaving 2 blocks in between each of the 5-inch squares. These are
Correct.
cut 5?
Yes.
Cut 5, so they sew down smaller.
Yes.
All right.
Then the applique pressing sheet, what this does is it allows you to use a very hot iron, activate the glue so it sticks to your fabric, and it also keeps this usable for your next step.
So this would be really important that you don't do this without the applique
Correct.
press sheet, because you'd have it all over your iron.
Correct.
But I get your point. This, a press cloth wouldn't work.
No, because it will fuse onto the grid.
And you need this to be usable for the next
Right.
step. Okay,
Right.
so if you tell us how to fuse, we don't use steam.
We don't use steam, and a very hot iron.
Okay.
10 seconds per fabric square is what I recommend.
Okay, and so you don't iron, you press, right?
Correct.
You don't go back and forth, back and forth. You just hold this, and you could do leg lifts while you're doing this and
Yes.
count to 10. That would be a way to, we like our sewers and quilters to get a little exercise.
Yes.
But fuse that in place, and you have a piece done for us so that we can see that. And I see these pieces hanging off, and that isn't a problem.
No, it isn't.
All right.
Our next step is to put our sashing strips, and they will border all of the squares. We're going to start out with our long sashing strips first.
Okay.
And as we lay those, you will see that none of the fabric touches each other.
Oh.
So the sashing strips and the blocks, the fabric does not touch.
And you cut all these with a rotary cutter
Yes,
before you started.
correct.
Okay.
So we're going to place these on, and if you saw, I had it go past the end of the grid.
All right.
So we make sure we've got an overhang of the sashing strips past the grid.
So that will be important when we go to piece this together.
Yes. And our trimming. So now we're going to fuse on
So you
the long sashing strips
fuse
first.
the long ones on first. Okay.
And then once those are fused,
All right, and you have one for us that's done like that. Fuse it in the same way. Use a press cloth.
use a pressing sheet.
Press
the
sheet.
applique pressing sheet.
And that actually is a non-stick sheet.
Right,
So it's a
correct.
special for this purpose, okay?
Then we'll come in and we're going to place our short sashing strips.
Okay.
Once again, they are not going to touch any of the other fabrics.
Okay, now there is a little space in between. Is it important that these be perfectly placed
No.
or no?
It's just eyeball so that you're not having any of the fabric touch each other. And the reason for that, Sue, is when we go to do our sewing,
So this would be, in this case, a small table piece or runner. This is done, ready to sew, ready to piece.
correct,
All right.
and none of the pieces are falling off.
No, they're all
They're all
fused
stuck.
onto that fusible grid. All right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now-
and I can see we were working this way.
We're working with it in rows,
Uh-huh.
but when we finish,
We turn it and it's
and
on
it will
point,
be on point.
which gives you that look. Perfect. Okay. So now how you said it's important to not have these touching, and I think I know why.
Right, we're going to take it and fold it right sides together, following the short sashing strip row.
The short sashing strip row where you have
Correct.
breaks along the way.
Correct.
All right. Mm-hmm.
The reason for doing that is they are the last ones that were ironed on.
Okay.
And therefore, we know exactly where we want to start to get those secured. Now, the other important thing to do, Sue, is always sew with the sashing strips on the top and the blocks on the bottom.
Okay, the sashing strip on the top and the blocks on the bottom. I'm going to go to the machine
Okay.
and do this. And so you suggested a 1/4-inch foot. There are a lot of different 1/4-inch feet. Different people have different machines too, and of course they would be different. This one has a guide on it. But I think I would have missed that tip. And I have to tell you, Lisa, I probably would have sewn. Do you press this first or do you just sew it?
No, because
don't
you
press it.
have the gap,
Okay.
you will
You don't want to
have
press
an
it.
automatic fold there.
So I'm using a turquoise thread here, but I could have, I did that mainly so people could see the stitching, but you would use a thread a quality sewing thread, straight stitch. Any suggestion on stitch length?
No, I think whatever you're comfortable using is fine. I'm somewhere between 2.5 and 3,
I was gonna
either
s-
or.
I was going to say 2.5. So here we see now that we have this piece pieced, and we're going to have to hurry here, but I will say that we can now show this is sewn, but we've got some big gapes here, so I bet I know what we do next.
We're going to take it after all of those sashing strips are sewn. We will fold it the opposite way and come back.
And again, are you sewing from the sashing strip side?
Yes.
Always sew from the sashing strip side. You suggested pinning at each one of these places where it joined, but of course we wouldn't sew over our pins. We would pull those out. This particular foot, metal foot with the guide, do you notice how the edge is right up against that guide?
Yes.
And
Very
s-
nice to use
And
the
so that
1/4-inch
works
foot.
very well. And then continue sewing all those rows.
Correct.
Do you use a special needle?
I like to use a Microtech Sharp
Okay.
needle. It goes through the grid very easily. And then on this side, you will see how your points, after you've sewn on the other side of that same sashing strip,
And so we can look at the underside of this one and see that it's completely stitched that way. Wow. And then you would finish it as you would you finish your quilt top with this method of piecing, and then finish it as you would finish any quilt
correct,
or any runner or table mat.
correct.
Thank you so much for a new technique and for being with us today.